Hello, everyone, and welcome to AI and Local News, our challenge demo day. I'm Matt McVeigh. I'm the community and project lead for AI and Local News at NYC Media Lab. And I'm so glad to have you all here to see the presentations from our 5 AI and Local News challenge teams. Here's the agenda for the day. I'm going to do a quick intro, and then we'll get into presentations from our 5 teams: information tracer, localizer, overtone, sim people, and social fabric for publishers. Each team will present their work, and then they'll respond to Q&A from our panelists. So a quick background on the NYC Media Lab, which is housed at NYU's Tandon School of Engineering. We do a couple of things here at the Media Lab. We collaborate on corporate innovation and R&D projects with our corporate members. We run philanthropic partnerships with our funders, and then we put on events for our community. And at NYC Media Lab, we get to collaborate with New York City's thousands of tech and media students, as well as those institutions' faculty and staffs. And we get to work with those faculty and students on innovative media and tech projects with our corporate members and partners. So, why local journalism and AI? Knight Foundation supported research into AI and automation in news. And that research looked at AI use at national, global, and local news organizations. And what they found was that AI could fit into all parts of the news production pipeline, from news gathering to news production, subscriber engagement, to product development. And one opportunity that was identified by this work was to find more ways to integrate AI and automation into local news in particular. For more info on AI and local news, the Associated Press, our partner, has just put out this great report, Artificial Intelligence in Local News, that looks sort of across the local and regional news organizations, just sort of their readiness and involvement with AI. The AI and Local News initiative is supported by Knight Foundation, and it's made up of 4 partners: Associated Press, Brown Institute's Local News Lab, our team at NYC Media Lab, and Partnership on AI. So for the AI and Local News Challenge, we had our cohort of 5 teams working throughout this spring. We met at weekly cohort sessions. We had a lot of guest speakers come in from places like United Robots, NewsWhip, Lead AI. We also had industry experts talking about US news deserts. We had people from Journalism AI and the Credibility Coalition. And our teams together met with more than 20 different journalism innovation mentors for feedback. And throughout the whole time, the teams have been building up their projects. Here are our 5 teams: information tracer, localizer, overtone, sim people, and social fabric for publishers. And I'm so glad to have this great panel with us to provide feedback to the teams in the Q&A. Cynthia Dubose, Vice President for Audience Growth and Content Monetization at McClatchy. Todd Gillespie, Senior Product Manager for API and Data Products at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And Cheryl Phillips, Hearst Professional in Residence at Stanford and founder of Big Local News. Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to your feedback and thoughts. So let's get into the presentations. up first is information tracer. So Zhouhan, I will hand things over to you and the floor is yours.
Great. Can you enable screen sharing? Okay, yeah. Screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. I'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Zhouhan. I just graduated from New York University Data Science PhD program. And together with my advisor, Joshua Tucker, who is a professor in political science at New York University, we're excited to present to you our project, Information Tracer. Whether you're a journalist or a researcher that study misinformation or any information operation on social media, one technical challenge you will face is how to uncover and track information operations across different platforms in a timely manner. So we are motivated by this challenge, and in this project, we want to solve, in particular, two problems. One is how to first collect data across different platforms, for example, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, etc. And the second problem is once we collect those raw data, how do we measure and quantify information spread, such as popularity, spamness? How do we measure those behaviors and generate intelligence? And toward that goal, we implement and propose Information Tracer. This is a web-based application, and you can actually visit our website. It's informationtracer.com to look and play with the interface. So basically, Information Tracer is an all-in-one platform that enable people to collect data, visualize data, and extract intelligence of how information spreads. So if we look deeper behind the scene, here is how Information Tracer works. From the left, there are three steps. Step one is we build a data collection pipeline to gather data from 5 different platforms. So currently we cover Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, and Gab. For most platforms, we have API access. For some platform like Gab, where there's no API access, we build our own crawler. And we're constantly adding new platforms whenever the technology is available. And the second step is once we collect the data, we implement and calculate different metrics to quantify news spread behaviors, such as popularity, spamness, etc. And the third step is we enable users to set thresholds so they can receive alert when a news breaks out. And I know there are already existing tools on the market that monitor social media trends. However, Information Tracer is distinct from current solutions. And here I list a couple of the popular tools that exist and how Information Tracer is different. To summarize, Information Tracer is more customizable. It provides more metrics, it covers more platforms, and it is also publicly accessible. And throughout the AI and local news challenge, we have been able to talk to different reporters and explore different use cases. And here I'm highlighting 3 use cases that people can benefit from Information Tracer. So each use case cover particular user groups. So the first group is academics. For example, people in university can use Information Tracer to collect data for their research projects. The second group of users is journalists. For example, we're actually talking to journalists from Africa Check, which is the largest fact-checking network in Africa, about using information tracer to monitor news in Nigeria. For example, Nigerian news related to the election. And that is a good example of going local, because previously, when we first built information tracer, we mostly focused on the United States. But now with the help of the local news challenge, we can start to cover other local regions. And the second group of users are researchers from NGO and other organizations who can use our tool to detect cyberbullying or other information operations. And altogether, our tool will help save time for the users and also facilitate accurate and timely reporting. To give you an example of how people can use information tracer and what intelligence they can get, I will walk you through how to trace a particular URL from change.org. So a little bit background. So right now there is still an ongoing legal battle, a lawsuit between two Hollywood celebrities, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. And according to some news reports, for example, the screenshot on the left, some people believe that Johnny Depp has used some bots on social media platforms to attack Amber Heard. And one of the URL that raised people's attention is this one from change.org, which is a platform to raise money. And this particular URL is about a campaign that wants people to donate money to remove Amber Heard from Aquaman, which is a movie that she will be part of. So is this campaign organic? It is inorganic. We can use information tracer to find a clue. So in order to do that, all we need to do is copy and paste the URL into our search bar and click search. And after that, the information tracer will gather all the posts that contain that link from different platforms and visualize them in a panel like this. So to read the graph, the x-axis is the timeline and the y-axis is the total number of interaction on each platform. And each dot is a post, and the bigger the dot, the more impression that post generates. And here we can see that this URL has been shared on Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, but on YouTube particularly, within a short amount of time, there were lots of videos generated. And actually those videos come from a few channels that are pro Johnny Depp and anti-Amber Heard. And with this behavior, actually some other researchers use our tool to gather this intelligence, and then on Twitter, they engage with Team YouTube, which is the official account of YouTube, to alert them about this suspicious behavior, so YouTube can further investigate. It is very hard to know exactly who is behind those campaigns because, as we know, attribution is very difficult, but at least our tool can be used to gather evidence to further the investigation. And just to recap, our mission in building information tracer is to save time for journalists and researchers and facilitate their accurate and timely reporting. And we will be continue doing this even after the challenge finishes. Thanks for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Zhouhan. And I will pull up the panel for Q&A now.
So I can start with a question. Zhouhan, can you provide a little detail with regards to how specifically you identified the pattern in the YouTube data and what it meant?
Yeah, so yeah, I have a slide actually about different metrics and thresholds. And here you can see it's a little bit into the technical detail, but basically, you know, the threshold can be as simple as just a count. And let's say for YouTube video, if this URL is shared by more than 20 different channels, then we can trigger an alert. And how we choose 20, this number is because we have been collecting just different news articles for a long time, so we have a large sample of how they are shared. So among those samples, we can calculate like a 95 percentile. So if for another news, if that metric is more than the 95 percentile, then that's something that's kind of out of the distribution. Yeah, so basically that's how we use those metrics. And yeah, so in this particular table, you can see we have other metrics. For example, the first row is called breakout skill. So it's a numerical score from 1 to 5 that indicates the number of platforms this URL is shared over. So the higher the breakout skill, kind of the more valuable this news article gets. Yeah. And yes, it's similar for other metrics.
And can you just show us real quick how that applied to the YouTube data that you had showed us about the Johnny Depp pattern?
Yeah, so for that one, basically, I think we were tracking the YouTube amplification. So basically we're counting so the metric would be the number of YouTube channel that's sharing that URL. So yeah, I didn't add that in this table, but basically that's another metric that the behavior we are detecting is YouTube amplification. Yeah.
So, Zhouhan, I was wondering, when you're using the tool, have you looked into being able to kind of decipher which accounts might actually be bots and which ones are like verified, or is there anything built in there of like suspected this might not be a real person?
Right. We have some visualization that can help people to try to infer, like right now. So right now our tool doesn't tell you if this account is bot or not. I think that's actually a very hard problem. I think that's kind of what Elon Musk was talking about recently. Like it's very hard to know exactly, but at least if you go to our web page, we will show you. Let's say for the Twitter conversation, we gather the retweets, we gather the replies. So we will show you who are the top retweeters, who are the top accounts that reply, and we show their account description and other kind of profile page, so people can go and check what is going on. And I guess regarding your point about Twitter bot, like for individual account, it's hard to know, but we do have some metric. For example, the second row here, we call it, so on the website, I think it's called CMT, like coefficient of traffic manipulation. But basically, that metric means we're calculating, for all the tweets we have, average tweet per user for users sharing that URL. And on average, you just share like a news article once, but if on average, that ratio is higher than 2 or even higher, it means some users are repeatedly sharing a particular link, and that might indicate that this group of people are, suspicious. So yeah, so we do implement some metrics to kind of capture this coordinated behavior.
Thanks. I just think from a journalist perspective, if I'm using this to try and figure out like where the spread is coming from, it's helpful to know whether it's actually stemming from a human or if it's something that is, from machine. So.
Great, and we have time for one more quick question if there is another.
I have just a question about the design of the site itself, and just terms, if you could just explain a little bit about what you're trying to do with the design of, like, if I'm looking at a tweet, and like, what do for example, just the sizes of the circles indicate? What about, why did you design the pop-ups the way, kind of the way you did, in terms of just ease of I don't know, accessing what's going on here?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, so the design, first, it's also a work in progress. That's why I think in the challenge we talk to journalists, and we hear like what they want to look at and what's more intuitive. Yeah, so yeah, that's definitely a work in progress. And for this particular graph, I think you mentioned the circle. Yes, so I didn't fully explain that. So basically, the x-axis is a timeline, and the time, and the y-axis is a cumulative a number of interaction on each platform. So each color is one platform, and one circle is a post. I mean, depending on different platform, like on YouTube, it will be a YouTube video. On Twitter will be a tweet, and then the size of the circle is the number of interaction of that post. So the bigger circle means kind of a more influential post. So kind of can identify like super spreaders by looking at those big circles. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Zhouhan. And now we will move on to our next presenter, Localizer. So let's see if I can queue up Jessica here.
All right, we ready?
Yep, ready to go.
Hello, I'm Jessica Davis, Senior Director at Gannett, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Steve Dorsey, Eric Ulken, Mike Stucka, and Danny Sanchez. We're here today to give an overview of the Localizer project and our efforts in automated text generation to grow subscriptions for local newsrooms. We'll share how Localizer informs readers, reduces newsroom toil, and why it's important to us as an engine for sustainable journalism by telling stories like we couldn't before. You can see Gannett's impact on local news as we cover the map with our 250 newsrooms, covering 50% of the US digital audience. National publications share the bigger trends on topics like the real estate market, like the national headlines you see here, but don't represent what's happening in our communities, just like the handful of local markets you can see us zooming in on here. With Localizer, we're able to go in closer on those hyperlocal trends, like the stories popping up that were actually published through Localizer that you can see here from our local markets. Who among us hasn't looked up the value of our home on Zillow or Redfin? But those sites don't show trends for the wider community beyond that one home. These headlines are useful to understanding what's happening locally. And by using natural language generation techniques, we're able to create highly relevant local content that's spurring digital subscription growth in Gannett's markets. Increasingly, this content is more likely to appear on a user's path to subscription. So here's how we create a Localizer story. We start off with structured data, the kind of stuff maybe you'd see in an Excel spreadsheet. And we transform that data and turn the text and numbers into stories, much like the Mad Libs you may have done as a kid. And that's how we can create stories at scale. Here's an example of one of our listing stories that ran on the Detroit Free Press, and my colleague Steve is going to drop a link in if you want to take a closer look. So here's really what's at stake and how that scaling works. In the old model, a story would take us 2 hours to report. And when we would do it across the network, that would get expensive quickly or could be inconsistent if people aren't available. Now in the new model, our NLG tools allow us, that same reporter, to do the same 2 hours, and we can create a consistent recurring story for hundreds of markets. So automated text really is important to us at Gannett because it allows us to provide valuable stories that convert subscribers at scale with that consistency that some of our newsrooms just can't achieve on their own. So all across the industry, right, we're dealing with newsrooms that have fewer journalists, And we want to be really clear today that we don't use NLG to replace journalists. The story templates are written by reporters and then shared to all our newsrooms. Our content is used to fill gaps in coverage on topics relevant to potential and current subscribers. And our NLG tools also free up other reporters to do high-level work that can't be automated. We found topics that are localized and of high interest to readers that we can generate from the data sources and save everyone time. Here's a short list of the impactful stories we've created, from hurricane trackers and COVID-19 stories to more analysis stories like our real estate sales and listing trends to personal income by county. By combining our reporting and data analysis capabilities with the natural language generation tools, we're creating valuable local journalism that moves the needle for our digital subscriptions business at a scale that just would not be otherwise cost effective. And we're currently going deep into automating real estate content, which is performing really well with search, social, and internal audiences for us. So let's go deeper on real estate. So during this NYC Media Challenge, we are happy to report that we were able to publish an additional real estate listings trend story. And our analysis on those stories shows 3 times stronger subscriber engagement compared to past Localizer stories, which we're really excited about. We also have a whole roadmap to go deeper into the real estate beat, and we're exploring additional stories, new data sets, and imagery solutions. So there are different degrees of news automation, and as you can see, we're right there in the middle with humans really driving this at Gannett. This is really important to us to ensure quality and that we uphold our journalistic standards. So here's what that human touch looks like. We're really, conducting audience research to find topics with high subscription conversion potential, finding that data source, writing the template, and then distributing it. And, really what's really important here is we're not using automated story generation to create a ton of content. We're careful to answer audience questions and meet their needs. And because we analyze and tweak the stories, we ensure continued relevance for ongoing projects. So here's some of that audience research that ensures the success of our stories. They fill an audience, they find an audience on search because we bake SEO optimization into the templates, even if a human doesn't have time to promote them, right, to the full extent that we should. They're still ensured that they're going to find an audience. So, and then, another step deeper, we take those reader questions and answer them with the data. So here's an example of real estate trend data on the left and a sample headline. And if you recall, market hotness was one of those audience questions on Google Trends. So who are we? Here's our core talented team from product and editorial that makes this all happen. We're all journalists committed to building a sustainable future for local journalism. And this is a sustainable project because we tap in our network of data journalists, developers, editors, producers, project managers, audience strategists, and product managers, as well as leveraging external partnerships like the NYC Media Lab engagement. At the beginning, these roles were just a fraction of time until we could prove success, and now we're happy to report some people are on this full time. So to close, Localizer delivers a steady diet of highly relevant local information to some of our demanding internal customers and soon perhaps external ones as well. As we look to meet local community information needs at a cost that our business model can support, Localizer is a powerful tool in the arsenal. Relevance at scale equals value for audiences equals sustainability for our newsrooms. Thanks for your time today. Here's our contact information if you'd like to partner with us further, and we're happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Let me pull up our panel here.
I have a question. So do these go automatically into your local newsrooms and publish just automatically onto their website, their news sites, or do they go through the, like an editing process at the local level, or is it all handled up at the Gannett level?
That's a great question. Thank you for it. So I think this slide really shows that we only push at the network level the stories in draft form into the content management system. So an editor actually has to hit publish. And we tell editors, you can add to this story, you can provide additional context, interview sources, add to it, or you can publish it as is because it is a standalone, it does hold up. And then we also, what's really neat is that we have editors from our network that edit the templates themselves. So a lot of human touch here at Gannett. thank you for the question.
Do you one more follow-up, do you track how often a local newsroom adds to the draft in various ways, expands it through anecdotal reporting?
Yes, we do track how many newsrooms publish it, and we do spot check them. We don't have like an automated way to see who added more, but the majority publish it as is, and a handful of newsrooms do add more to it. And we do we have a very collaborative process where we invite newsroom input, and we do hear from them, and they do actually keep informing our future stories by questions they have or data sets they have access to. So it's been really, really great.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Todd. You raised your hand. I'll wait.
Thank you. Sorry.
I can't see everybody else, so I guess I need to figure out my view.
Yeah, so I was going to ask Jessica if you could share a little bit more about the business impact of Localizer, and like, you know, you mentioned that the auto-generated articles are a little bit more likely to appear than auto-generated articles in the user's path to subscription. So I'm curious if you could share like what those numbers look like, or if there are other metrics for success that you used to establish this practice.
Yeah, I can't share like specific numbers, but I do have this that absolutely, I mean, because we pick topics that subscribers in our network are highly engaged with, right? How do you generate subscriptions, right? You need loyalty. And so we're really building up consistency on that beat. Some newsrooms have real estate reporters, some don't, right? Depending on the size of the newsroom, and our network varies from very small newsrooms to larger ones for metros, right? So, you know, really some of our success metrics do include, you know, yes, subscription conversions, also page views to make sure, you know, we are contributing to our reach goals, because, you know, we're not just a subscription business, we have advertising model as well. We also look at search and social referrals and overall subscriber engagement. So if they already have converted with us. And so, yeah, we do see on these, you know, really good full funnel activity on that. So
cool. Just minor detail though, you mentioned 3x stronger subscriber engagement than with past Localizer stories. Were those prior Localizer stories not auto-generated, or it was just like a previous iteration of the same practice?
Yeah, they're all the same process that we've been describing here. And so some of those, let me see, where's my stories? Sorry. So just that, you know, really what we found with them, you know, they included like COVID-19 stories and stuff. I can't find it. COVID-19 stories and things like that. Those had good conversion rates, even compared to like human reported articles. It's the consistency that we think really helps with getting this, you know, building the loyalty that leads to the stronger conversions. So does that help? So it's really, you know, we've had hurricane trackers, and that's less of that's really up here that has life-saving information. Where's the hurricane now? And, you know, that's different than a real estate trend story, right? In terms of the audience we're targeting there. So does that help? So more and more we're pushing, you know, we still have our public service where we're freeing up time, you know, for public service journalism, but more and more we're doing these real estate stories where, you know, we really are trying to help spur our subscription growth through important storytelling.
Well, thank you.
Jessica, can you talk a bit about what happens between the template and then the actual story getting to the local newsroom for the editor to look at? So is it someone having to fetch the data and make sure it flows in there, or what, or is it automatic? How does it know that it's time to go in there?
Yeah. So on our process, you know, we're very human driven on identifying the data source and doing the analysis. So really all it takes for our system is an Excel spreadsheet, because you need a data set to do natural language generation, to do automated text, right, for stories. And so really, you know, our tool allows us to hook up we have to write the template, and then it's like Mad Libs, right? So if there's a rise for a market in the real estate, in that trend, okay, then we'll use the word rise. And so the data feeds which words. So we hook it up, and that's what allows us. I didn't put this step on there, but we do test. We do have a lot of editing before we get to distribution. And we even have a smaller step for news stories, where we will test it with a smaller set of our markets to get newsroom feedback, see the audience response, and often we'll make tweaks before we'll distribute to the 250. We learn a lot from those tests, and it allows us, at the scale we have, it allows us to move a lot more rapidly and get more targeted feedback. So we did that for the real estate stories by working with our New York markets. Does that help, Cynthia? Do you want to ask a follow-up?
No, I think that's clear. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Team Localizer. That was great. And up next is Overtone. So I will take a minute here and get them all set up, and you're ready to go.
Great. Hi, I'm Christopher Brennan from Overtone, and we're going to talk about data now, but it's a different sort of data than you might have seen being used by publishers before. If we look at the next slide. So the question is, what can you know about an article online? Oftentimes you think of this as the most viewed article, the most shared article, these sort of metrics, engagement metrics, or the author, the domain, etc. We go at it a little bit differently. If you go on to the next slide, you can see on the right, we have what we sometimes call derivative metrics. These are things like the shares, the clicks, the publication, etc. That's not really focused on the content itself. These are the sort of metrics that are often used by algorithms to sort through articles online, to show you what's in your newsfeed, to show you something on Google News, etc. We on the left do it a little bit differently in that we're looking at the text itself. So we look at the journalistic signals within this text to see what sort of article it is. And Overtone, that's what our data is about. It's about differentiating between different sorts of articles. And that's especially important because of local news, in that oftentimes they're not really served by the big algorithms that focus on things like clicks and shares. However, they do include amazing content, amazing articles. And so we look for things like original reporting, sourcing. Is it based on aggregation of a tweet or Instagram, or is it based off of interviews? As well as perspectives. Is it looking at one angle of a story, or is it looking at different angles and really providing that in-depth value to their readers and to their communities? If we move forward. So this leads to our scale. And having worked as a reporter and in local news, if you ask an editor or reporter, they can differentiate on what this story is doing. Is it a quick update on the lower end? Is it non-news? Is it the recipe? Is it sort of a bloggy little rant? Is it a daily story that's quite normal? Or is it that added value going out into the field, doing analysis, et cetera, all the way up to that enterprise story that really is providing that added value? So moving on. So we provide differentiation between these different sorts of articles. To recap, we're looking at the text, not the rest. We're looking at the quality rather than things like engagement metrics in terms of sorting through things. And because we're not looking at engagement metrics, this means we are immediate. The second text is this, either as a published article or even in the CMS. You can use our data to start moving things around, either as data that comes from our API to anywhere in your system, or in the feeds product where you can look at a certain subject, either of your own articles or articles in a network or external articles. The external is actually quite interesting in that you find sort of gems from places you might not have seen before. We did a search on Syria a while ago and looked through kind of the whole internet on articles on Syria for a week, and we got something from the Bennington Banner in Bennington, Vermont. And you think, what does Vermont have to do with Syria? And it turns out that one of the leading US experts on Kurdish politics and culture is this guy named Galbraith, who lives in Vermont. And that week he gave exactly one interview to exactly one newspaper, and that was his local newspaper, and appeared in the Bennington Banner in Vermont. Our algorithm was able to find these signals, pluck that up out of the ether and say, hey, pay attention to this. There's something interesting happening here. To go forward, it's not all Syria. It's really about those stories that provide added value. So the top story, or kind of the most in-depth story, of this feed is about a cobbler in Kansas. And this is an example of our feeds project that we provide to a network of newspapers, this looking at newspapers in the Midwest. Going forward, again, so the type of use cases that we have is 1, highlighting, syndicating, as we just showed. 2, productizing. So if you have data on all of these different articles, you can make a newsletter very easily. Show me the in-depth stories from sports for the last week, the in-depth stories from business for the last week, make a newsletter. Also on the monetization aspect, things like paywalls are one of our use cases. Continuing with that a little bit, this is information that we have from a study we did with a English language newspaper in Europe. And over 4 months, we found that 66% of their articles that led to a conversion to a subscriber on this website were those higher end articles. So it's not saying that every article should be on that higher end, but it's saying readers do see the sort of value in this and want to create that long-standing engagement as a subscriber or a donator, et cetera. Going forward a little bit more. So what do we do after this? Overtone is very keen on providing our value, not just to the English-speaking world, but to all communities, marginalized communities that are not really well served by, again, the algorithms that focus on things like clicks and shares. So with the help of NYC Media Lab, this spring we did a proof of concept of a Spanish model, which you can see has 400 million speakers. And then if you go to the next slide, we were able to use this to have some things, to have a feeds product. Again, it's not just the feeds, but side by side, English and Spanish. So we worked with the Center for Community Media at CUNY, which lots of you might be familiar with. You see the Black Media Initiative. There's a feed from I think a week ago of articles that were in depth from that network of papers, which is several hundred papers, as well as on the right, those are some of the first results from our Spanish language model for the Latino Media Initiative, which operates mostly in Spanish. Moving forward, this is a quote from Cheryl Thompson Morton. Again, why would you use this? Because you can isolate, find certain type of story, the high quality story, as Cheryl said, more equitable and less time consuming than lots of other ways of searching around the internet. Moving on. This is the Overtune team, myself, Philip, sharing the slides, Reagan and Natalia, the Spanish editor who helped us with the Spanish project. With further funding, we would hope to improve that Spanish language model to bring it entirely up to the standard of the English language model and keep on providing value to lots of different communities. I think it particularly benefits the local news community, which is often overlooked, and also benefiting the internet at large. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So let me pull up our panel here for Q&A.
I can never find my hand, so I'll just go first, my virtual hand. Chris, so I have 2 questions. One is how quickly, so what is the process for the feed to be created? So if I'm in a newsroom and I want an Overtone feed, what is that? Am I emailing you? What does that look like?
So that content can come sorry, I actually don't like the word content, articles, can come from the publisher themselves, who feeds us through things like XML. Also, we have a third-party partner who can go out and scrape things for us on different topics, for example, and we can set that to say, do this group of sources for top articles on the environment, for example, and then show that feed. We like the feed because it shouldn't all just be data into a system, which we do with an API call, but having something that editors can use as well.
Which actually leads me to my second question that was not on purpose. So do you have partners who are actually taking that feed or that feed and sitting it on their site like a widget of like more information or editor's pick saying like here is, you said you don't like,
so
here are articles that we are standing behind as being quality around a certain topic?
So we have people who use us for syndication across their network. There's a network of several hundred newspapers who uses us, as well as for newsletters there and say, on this topic, that can help feed our newsletter. But we don't actually have a use case of a widget on a website yet, but that's something we would be definitely interested in.
Thank you.
I think you're first, Todd.
Sure. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what goes on under the hood inside of the Overtone product. Like, do you use models that you've worked to train more or less manually over, like, how did you build your product?
Yep. So our model is a Roberta-based model, which transformer-based that lots of people use. And the main sort of added value is our data set that we've built on top of that, all of which it's more than 60,000 articles, and all of which in some form or fashion has been looked over or batch checked by a human. So it's not just kind of pulling in articles from wherever. And really that's important because we're not saying, this outlet good, this outlet bad. It's really about the individual article, the individual text that goes in to make that data set.
How do you, I guess, I'm not even sure how to frame the question. What do you do with news articles that are behind paywalls? Do you just lose out on those essentially, or do you have agreements with news organizations that might want their articles to go out in some kind of limited fashion? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so directly with publishers, oftentimes we get the text from their CMS or something like that. For that broad use case of looking over the internet, the third-party provider we use has agreements with the publishers and involves subscription to those.
I have one more. You spoke a little bit about a couple of local media initiatives for Black and Latino feeds. Can you talk a little bit about what these offerings, like how would you offer these products to like very small local media orgs?
So I think one of the benefits or kind of an idea for local news is to work as a group to have enough content or have enough articles to provide to their readers when someone in a different part of the country is covering something. So I do really believe in that syndication use case. For smaller outlets, obviously they have a smaller amount of articles per day and per month, though I still think in terms of using it for things like newsletters, using it for things like paywalls, that our data can be useful there, just to pull up an article from 2 years ago that actually is a beautiful in-depth article on topic X.
All right. Thank you so much, Overtone team. And also thank you so much for the excellent questions by our panelists here. This is really great. Up next is Sim People. So I will bring Swapnil on board here. Okay.
Okay, so there we go. Are my slides visible? Is this good? Or also, maybe this is better.
Yep, we can see them.
Perfect. Hey everyone, my name is Swapnil and I'm along with my team, Shwetanshu Singh and Harshit Agarwal. I'm presenting our AI-based analytics software that helps journalists at local news organizations connect better with audiences online. So I'm going to be a contrarian and start with some good news. The world is going digital and so is local news. In fact, revenues for Lion publishers, local independent online news publishers, are up 33% post-COVID. And there are reports that state that there is an increasing attention and trust in online news across 46 countries. So that's great. As you might have guessed, this is not the complete picture. There are challenges here. Over 60% of these Lion publishers, as it turns out, are 1 or 2 member teams relying largely on philanthropic donations to survive. And if these donations disappear, then so do these local news organizations. And we end up with a bunch of news deserts or places with no news coverage at all. So the directive for what we're doing is, for Sim People, is we try to improve the understanding of journalists for audiences across platforms and create a certain digital strategy for them in an automated fashion. So our software automatically creates this digital strategy for their content. This is designed to improve both their reach as well as their revenues from digital ads, which is a crucial channel for most local news organizations. So our product effectively tracks engagement and KPIs like others out there. However, the unique feature for Sim people is we're able to predict a post's reach and the best channels to try and improve engagement, ultimately creating this automated digital strategy. So we have built dashboards for Reddit and Twitter that not only track these metrics, which is where users come from, what subreddits they belong to, or in Twitter, there is geolocation that tells us where you're getting engagement from, but also what your audience is interested in. So they allow you to sort of check out what organizations like you have done in the past to connect with their audiences and continue to be doing. So for example, we're running a sort of pilot with this organization called the VT Digger, and this is a sister organization called 7daysvt.com. So across Reddit and Twitter, they can try and check out what is going on for other platforms out there in their markets to try and figure out maybe they're doing something differently or they're getting different kinds of subscribers and how engagement is working there. And so the question is, how do we go about, well, before that, this is the kind of dashboard we're building. Sort of skipped over the demo because I was already shared with you guys, but you can see that there are these widgets that are set in a manner that is amenable to the journalist. We're also looking at plugging this into a CMS to reduce the friction that would occur from going about this. In general, though, all of this is underlying all of this is a key advancement we've made at NYU and Oxford, which is probabilistic AI. So this is a particular toolkit called simulation-based inference that allows us to simulate social networks using AI. In colloquial terms, we're modeling how people behave online based on real-world data from across multiple channels like CrowdTangle, which is Facebook, YouGov, Twitter, and Reddit. So we aggregate all of these data sets and shout out to Information Tracer for giving us access to start us out. And once we have these data, we're able to condition user behavior to produce something that looks like this. So this is what you're seeing is like a graph. This is a toy scenario we've contrived for people to understand what we're doing. And so in this graph, there are these nodes that are users. There is this big gray interconnected web, which is this friend follower network. And there are two kinds of people in this world, people who love pineapple on pizza and people who hate pineapple on pizza. And all we're doing is using the data that we've observed to condition how this discussion on pineapple pizza might evolve, and particularly how these users' preferences or the colors might shift over a period of a window of time that we're looking at. So what we see is eventually the conversations go in a direction where these people who hate pineapple on pizza eventually try and get to a point where they're acknowledging that pineapple on pizza is for everyone. This is, of course, my personal preference, which is why the simulation is all about me. I'm kidding, but hopefully I've sort of highlighted that there are these cool things that we can do with data across multiple platforms, and this is like the core science underlying our platform. So more practically, what we're doing with the VT Digger, for example, is there are a bunch of posts. To give you some context, the VT Digger is an organization that didn't have a digital strategy per se. They do have a social media presence, but they don't have people sort of monitoring all of that. And in fact, they had to turn off comments because there was so much spam and vitriol coming in that they couldn't filter all of them. So that makes them a sort of prime pilot for us to help. And so we're doing something super simple to start out with, for example, tracking their posts on Reddit to figure out what other things these audiences that they get engagement from are interested in. And so when they have content that fits into these categories, we can predict that this is where you should go about posting this content in order to appeal to your subscribers. This is a very simple example. There are obviously a lot more things we're doing about this, but in general, we come from a background of engineering, science, and policy. So I'm a PhD student at NYU. I'm working with Oxford as a visiting researcher and have a background in nuclear physics. Harshit is working on health ML at Twitter. He has a master's from University of Illinois. Sorry, I thought someone says. And working at Twitter, and Shwetanshu comes in with the policy and data for good background. Also completed his master's recently. And worked on projects with the NYC Media Lab and the Times. So what's next on the cards for us? Well, we're using this sort of network science to understand how fact checks can be issued to a wider audience. And someone mentioned coordination before, and we're actually with Oxford, we were looking at coordinated inauthentic behavior on social networks. And we've actually been delivered invited talks to Twitter and Facebook discussing these sorts of this network science to simulate interventions on social networks. So big props to Matt and the cohort and the team at the NYC Media Lab for pushing this from a scrappy research project to a point where we're actually actively talking with the US Air Force and a Microsoft-backed startup to deliver a sort of commercial version of this. We're in an open source pilot, and we're looking at funding sources, including the SBIR, STTR grants. So hopefully I've convinced you that we're on the route to provide this AI toolkit to help newsrooms capitalize on the digital transitions, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you so much. Swap now.
Should open chat.
Hey, Swapna. So I do have a question about the predicting where to post. Do you all also make recommendations on the timing? And then any nuances, like, okay, so if you're posting in this platform, here are hashtags or here are words that are typically going to help increase that engagement.
For sure. So specifically what we're doing is we're modeling individual level behavior. So that tells us the kinds of sessions that users have. And we know that in this subreddit, members are typically online at this time. And so that allows us to figure out like, okay, it's probably likely that in this window of time, posts seem to get more engagement than other windows of time. Similar sort of thing for Twitter. But yeah, that's the idea for us. The content side of analysis is largely relegated to topics. So since we just started out, we're not doing word level modeling. We're just aggregating tweets by topic and figuring out who talks about what sorts of categories.
Is that on your radar to do the word model?
So ideally, we have a lot of rich data sets, and if I could have like 3 times the team we currently have with the same sort of caliber, we would be doing a lot of amazing stuff. So in like 4 months, we've come a long way. So I'm super happy, like exploring a bunch of directions. So I should mention, like on the radar, I thought I had a slide about this, but it's probably skipped. Yeah, so on the radar, we have a bunch of things. Like there is the transparency and accountability angle on this, where every organization outside on social network has a certain ideological bent. And sure, there is one thing about like what they say, and the other thing about what they're actually doing. Doing that is on the radar. We've spoken with some people at Pointer about fact-checking deployments to sort of combat misinformation, especially COVID-19. And then the final thing is recommender systems are a big part of like how content is distributed. So we want to examine how one, coordinated behavior works, and 2, recommender systems amplify these kinds of misleading posts on social networks.
Could you talk briefly about the feedback you've gotten from Vermont Digger? And I'm sorry, Todd, I didn't mean to jump in front of you. I just saw your hand.
So it's very early. It's been 2 weeks. But what we've learned from them is the science really doesn't matter to people. All they care about is like the feature and how well that feature actually works for them. And so even doing like simple things without like machine learning and predictions is super helpful for them. So one of the things for them was who is talking about them in negative manners online, because that drives a lot of negative traffic their way. And in fact, there was a man who showed up at the office as a result of some conversations. So actually, this is being recorded. So I mean, there are things we've discovered about like things that happen, and the summary is build simple features first, and that's exactly what we're doing.
So my question, I'm gonna uplift Ramon's question from the chat, which is he's asking how detailed are those topics? I guess meaning how granular, and how many topics? Yeah, and I would also ask, I would add to that, like, how did you create your taxonomy? Like, what process did you follow to identify your taxonomy that you used?
That's an excellent question. So Reddit has these things called wikis, which are effectively user-generated categories of how subreddits are organized. And so what we did was I manually scraped about 5,000 different wikis, sorted them in order, verified that this was an agreed upon order by a bunch of people. And then what we do is for a new subreddit that comes in, say Mormon politics, that gets split up using this algorithm called the Viterbi hashtag splitting algorithm, which is something cool that splits words for you reasonably well. That then goes into a word embedding model, and that embedding is matched to your existing sort of categories. So we have 5,000 Reddits actively labeled under 23 top level categories and 4 levels below those. So a really, really rich hierarchy of categories that you can choose to model your content at. So what I talked about was the highest level of categories is something like animals, discussions, general, politics, other. And so under politics, there is world politics. Under world politics, there is US politics. So that is the sort of level of richness for these categories that we're looking at.
Yeah, I'll agree. That was a great question, Ramon.
All right. Thank you so much, Swapnil and Team SimPeople. And up next is our final presentation from Social Fabric for Publishers. So let me pull up Evan here. And the floor is yours.
Thanks everyone for coming today. I'm Evan Friedman. This is Brad Friedman. We're with Social Fabric for Publishers. So today we know consumers love social media. They're spending 141 minutes a day on social sites versus 13 minutes on news sites. Silicon Valley has really innovated their products. They've also leveraged news content along the way. The news industry, meanwhile, their products have basically stayed the same, and we want to help them leverage social on their sites for their own purposes. We've built technology to allow news sites to provide more of what the social platforms offer that consumers love, including bringing the influential social conversation around an article's underlying topic. This is unique technology that uses millions of data points and signals to verify topically, categorize, and filter the social conversation in a way that can be presented alongside an article in an editorially friendly manner. You can see here an example where we have an article on a publisher site, and on the right side, you see the social conversation, including the public figure involved, if they've said anything on the underlying topic, a news site staff, notable people and influencers, experts, and more. And we know social media sites send 21 billion page views or visits to news sites each year. How do we take this conversation and bring it to publisher sites in a way that they can benefit? Social platforms are a wedge between the publisher and the consumer. You want to own the relationship between the visitor coming from social to your site. So we're going to look at an example of how we can take that social visitor and convert them into a registered user. When a visitor lands on an article from a social link, we know that they like social media. We know that they are interested in following people to understand their lens on the world and how they see perspectives on different topics. Well, on your article page, we can provide the publisher with a way for these visitors to log in with their social account and see what their friends are saying about the underlying topic of the article, along with the larger community of public figures, influencers, commentators, and more. And here's just an alternative example where we see the social conversation at default, but that users can log in to see their personalized friend reaction. So this allows the publisher to have more opportunities to capture email. When a user signs in, they're going to be asked if they can pass along the email to the publisher. Now the publisher has an opportunity to have a first-party data relationship with the user outside the social platform, and they can begin their subscription funnel. We have data from Gannett that shows a registered user is 4 times more likely to become a digital subscriber than an anonymous reader. So now you have the direct relationship with the consumer and the subscription funnel begins. We know that users who visit sites 3 times per week or more are 8 times more likely to subscribe. So for many publishers, email newsletters are a big part of that subscription funnel strategy. Well, the great thing about the registration from the social user is you can tap into their social graph to provide more opportunities to engage them with articles on topics that they like based on their interests. You can also use friend recommendations, articles their friends might be recommending on your domain, or we can topically match comments to your article inventory. And of course, once they become a subscriber, you want to keep them as one, and showing that your content has value, reflects their interest, and gets them back to your site is key. In some industry experiments, personalized newsletters provided 49% less cancellation. And of course, the rich social data can be used to provide more opportunities to personalize your site. Even the New York Times on their homepage are doing experiments with personalizations. You can provide newsletter callouts for newsletters they might subscribe to, or even customize paywall messaging. And of course, what's more powerful than seeing a face or a name that you know recommending content to you? You can recirculate your visitor with articles that their friends are recommending, and we can match topical comments to your article inventory, or if they've shared a link on your domain. So we know Silicon Valley has really taken chances, innovated, and won and taken publisher market share. The news industry, meanwhile, needs to innovate and create products that tap into tomorrow's audiences. We've used this AI and local news challenge to think of ways that we can help create a more sustainable industry, and are starting to talk to both local publishers and national publishers that we want to be able to help across, including some of the people on this call. We'd invite anyone who'd like to reach out to us to contact us, and we thank you for your time, and we look forward to creating a better industry together. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Evan and Brad. And let me pull up the panel one more time here. All right.
Hey, Evan and Brett, question. So with what you've built, is a user able to join the conversation in that widget on the right-hand side? Or do they have to go back to wherever the conversation is happening? Like, can they tweet from?
I will answer questions.
Yeah, yes, they can, once signed in, they can add to the conversation and it gets sucked into the widget. So yes, it's about keeping the consumer on your site, providing more of what these social platforms offer baked into the site and increasing time spent. So yes, absolutely.
So it's sucked in, but it's also pushed out, right? On whatever
Correct.
platform they chose
Correct.
to.
Yes, which it can also be used to drive traffic back to the site by providing a referral link to that article page. So
I see.
The consumer's followers can then also see it.
And then also when you were talking about the research, the friends recommendations. So can you talk a little bit about what is powering that? Is it looking by the topic? I guess I'm also kind of wondering how you choose what the topic is. And then what if there is nothing around that topic? Then does that collapse, or are you programming it to serve additional research?
So, yeah, great question. So, I mean, there's obviously different ways of doing it where consumers, folks that are following have shared a direct link to the domain, which is obviously a clear example. There's examples where maybe someone's following has liked or retweeted something that someone else has posted that links back to the domain. Then there's this sort of comment matching where someone says something about a particular topic, and then we're matching it to the inventory of all the publisher articles. And for that, we look at the language that people use, and this is built for direct publishing to the news industry. I'm a former journalist turned engineer, and we understand the high standard that the publishing industry has, the do no harm. So, we very much look at A, using high confidence, and then B, filtering out anything with, questionable language, anything that's particularly questionable. Even if someone uses the word BS, we won't let that in, just to be extra safe. I hope that answered your question, but we look at a variety of ways. And then, if there's nothing there for the, for the potential recirculation, then the unit just doesn't have to show. And obviously we know publishers are already suggesting editors picks and, editors picks and algorithmically, more stories you might like. So this can just integrate as other options within that set, or the unit could collapse.
Thanks.
So I'll go ahead and ask. The question I was going to ask was echoed by Neil Gladstone in the chat. I'll let him ask it. So does the functionality of the conversation allow for multiple social sources, or is it currently structured for one social feed, for example, Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, where the user needs to sign in for multiple platforms? And I'll just add to that, I know that Twitter probably has some API limitations, and I was going to ask, like, what social media platforms other than Twitter do you have integrated currently, and what are your plans there?
Yes, it's definitely on our roadmap. And so, like, in terms of the overall social conversation, we can show from a variety of sources, including Facebook. I think, like, podcasts, YouTube, every publisher has their specific preference. So that's all configurable. And then in terms of, we know Facebook is very important to local news as part of this local news and AI challenge. We've been thinking a lot about local news and news deserts. And so that's something in terms of sign in with Facebook. We have the functionality now. We will be working with the NYC Media Lab to talk more to Facebook about expanded capabilities so we can help drive incentive for a consumer with Facebook to sign in. And Twitter, of course, is sort of where we started with for that particular use case.
Any final questions for the Social Fabric team? Okay, thank you all so much, Evan and Brad. Let's see if I can do this. All right, thank you all so much for those presentations. And thank you all so much also to our panelists for being generous with your time and providing just great questions and feedbacks for all of our teams. I will just leave you all with kind of a big thanks here. Thanks everyone for joining too and really making the chat sort of a rich conversation as well. I know that there were a lot of great questions that came in from you all attending in the audience too. So congrats to our 5 AI and local news challenge teams. And thanks everyone for joining us. Please keep up if you're interested with the Media Lab by joining our newsletter. We also have a specific newsletter for the AI and local news challenge. That's a great place to kind of keep up with opportunities and things from kind of the partners across the whole initiative. And yeah, thanks everyone so much for your hard work and the audience for your interest in this subject. And we will be connecting with you soon at further convenings around this topic. Have a nice day, everyone.